So one other signature practice of our tradition, in fact, maybe even our namesake, is dhutanga practice.
Right.
So some of them are built into our lifestyle already, but can you talk about like what the purpose of it is and when we take on additional practices?
Right. Yeah, I mean, some are sort of what we take on. Some are what we, are sort of part and parcel of the how we function as a monastery. Say, like eating in our bowls it's like a dhutanga practice, but it's what we do, and so that a lot of it is just so much of it's around simplicity and kind of going against the grain of what we prefer, what we like, and none of them are extreme. And sometimes they're called ascetic practices, but they're much more setting a tone of simplification and just not following a kind of a normal habit pattern. And that's really important in terms of training, because so much of the training that we do and why the strength that we end up cultivating, or stability, is the ability to be able to be comfortable in many different situations, and simplicity really helps with that. Or the occasions of putting forth effort for some reason or other, or having to cope with uncertainty, like taking on a pindabat practice where one doesn't receive any food other than what one receives on pindabat. So then there's a daily uncertainty there. Am I going to get anything to eat? Am I going to get, even if I get something to eat, is it going to be what I like? It's just, and even if it's not fully sort of formed in the mind, and it's still kind of there. And I can remember doing pindabat practice, right? And we're just and then it's amazing how, especially as a junior monk, and then how far the eye goes out to see if there's going to be anything left for me, on the tray or the whatever the person is on pindabat making offerings, and and it's just sort of the eye just goes there, and so it's those are so it's sort of desire, fear, worry, or one of the practices of eating everything in your own bowl. It's not taking anything out and putting it in your bowl lid and separating stuff out. And it just is it's food for a day and a night, and so that it's changing one's relationship to basic things like food and shelter and robes and sleep. I mean, that's one of the dhutangas of not lying down to sleep. And this sleeping sitting up. That's so there's these basic sort of things that are part of the human condition that we start to, once we're sort of settled and comfortable in our precepts and our training. Then you pay attention to how to push that envelope a bit. What can I do? And they're voluntary, and two, they're something that sometimes you only take on for short periods of time. Say like a Pindabat practice. Here that you once a week we go Pindabat. That's a tough practice. And so if that's what one was doing, then it would be untenable. And sometimes some monks will make that determination before they go out on Pindabat and just eat that day what they receive on alms round. So it's sort of working with that, experimenting with it. So a lot of it is experimenting, or say like say three-road practice, which is really tough, and then say like Tankon Danyo did practice with the keeping working with that, and then sort of how to just not be using a different kinds of sweaters and socks and stuff, and it's just it's an experiment and sort of see what comes up, and how do I use it to help refine my ability to be comfortable with conditions that we actually have little control over, and in that life. I mean, we don't have much control over life, and so then being able to work with some of these practices that start to highlight that, or doing sitters practice, and it's we get so much refuge out of being able to annihilate ourselves in sleep, and then if you don't lie down, it's it's not there, and so that usually takes about a week to start to feel comfortable sitting up and sleeping. And I remember that the first time I took it on, I did it as that first vasa at Wat Nana Chat, and determined the vasa. I'm going to spend 3 months and not lie down. So then, and as it got toward the end, I was sort of fantasizing, I can't wait till this is over, and then I can lie down. and then the sort of the last, the end of the vasa comes, and I get to lie down, and you're, man, it hurts, just having a body is painful, and you're able to actually get used to a lot, and so that's something that is the Dhutangas start to give you a certain flexibility or capacity to not be intimidated by the uncertainties of existence, and there's a real kind of stability or solidity that comes from those Dhutangas, and you have to be measured in how you do it, because you can remember the first. Often at the beginning of vasa at Wat Papong, Ajahn Chah one of the things he used to do was just go over the Dhutanga practices and remind everybody what they are, and And then so is anybody interested in taking on certain practices, and of course, apart from sort of this hands shoot up, yeah, I'll take them all. It just made himself so miserable. I said, you got points for enthusiasm, but not much for kind of discernment on that. So because it isn't say a competition or something. It's really those are practices, and of course they say some are kind of part and parcel of our day-to-day life in most forest monasteries, and they'll take them on in different ways. So as I was mentioning the other day of say like Luang monastery, where the whole monastery is the basis of the monastery is a dhutanga practice of just eating what one gets on pindaba, and and that was would have been probably quite a an austere practice in early days of establishing the monastery, but in later years, and even when because I first went there probably late 1970s, and Dhamma was so respected for so long, and then people were lined up out the front of the monastery. It was quite a but still, in the end, what you've got is just what's in your, like you have to keep dumping your alms bowl out, and you end up with what is in your alms bowl, and you go back into the monastery and take it out and arrange your bowl. So it's hard to you still don't get what you want, in the sense of absolutely, exactly. Yeah. So it's a good way of taking on and investigating the nature of desire, nature of our how do we make it a lifestyle? Again, because you really want to be cultivating and developing the practice in a way that you recognize, this is how I want to live for the long term. And part of living a monastic life is also how do I keep challenging myself? How do I not get in a rut? How do I not get too comfortable? And that's it's important because it's just in our nature to habituate ourselves to pretty much anything. So then being willing to challenge that, investigate it, and reflect and see what are the attachments that do come up. What are the kinds of fears and discomfort that come up, and how do I work with them? So those are some aspects of dhutanga.
So when we do challenge ourselves, obviously it'll bring up, difficulties, kilesa, suffering, etc. What are some guidelines for when is it too much, or how do we find out if and how we're benefiting from these things?
Well, I mean, these are sort of things you can't sort of take on a superficial basis, sort of like you try it for the first day, and yeah, of course it's uncomfortable. So as I said, for myself anyway, and I've done, say, like Siddharth practice quite a few times, and yeah, there's always a transition at the beginning of 5 to 7 days of getting comfortable. Well, not comfortable, but getting bearable with sitting and sleeping and not lying down. So you have to sort of be willing to try it out and see what happens. And some are, because we're, that perspective, having a long-term perspective of what is the how do I cultivate this practice over long term, and when is it that it okay, I do need to say, like, remember one monk who was determining Pindabat and then going off on these obscure Pindabat routes, and he just wasn't getting enough to eat. And it's basically a lot of sticky rice and something, some odd bit of fish or a frog every once in a while. And it was really unhealthy. And had to ask him to stop. I think one monk sort of, okay, he ended up getting so constipated that he had to quit. He just wasn't eating anything that was that sticky rice was just going into a ball. So you just have to pay attention to health. Pay attention to the because if it's just constant difficulty, then it's hard to work up the energy for practice. The mind needs to be brightened somehow, and part of the Dhutangas is picking it up in a way that you're doing something difficult. You know that it's something difficult. You're doing something that is creating a simplicity that we're not used to, or not. But it's also something, again, having some confidence or faith in the Buddha's kind of encouragement, and then recognizing that and the Buddha also said these are it's not required. That's like when Devadatta was going to have all the Dhutangas sort of locked into this is a Vinaya rule as opposed to a possible practice. And then the Buddha, no, it's not the way forward. So being able to, and sometimes one has to sort of recognize, okay, this really isn't helping right now, and to ease back and not find some sort of new normal, or where sometimes, but then sometimes looking back over something that was difficult, this incredible delight that comes. So it's like Ajahn Jayasaro. There's this one time that Ajahn Chah was really ill, and we thought, oh man, he's not going to make it. And this time, because of course he's been sick and very ill many times, and then Ajahn Jayasaro sort of made a determination that he was going to as a dedication or practice to Ajahn Chah, then he would do Siddhar's practice until Ajahn Chah passed away, and then he got better. And it was like 3.5 years before he passed away. And Ajahn Chah, so when he makes the determination, he doesn't back off. So it was that. So even when we went on Tudong together in India, and he was. It was probably about in the middle of that time, and so he would, even when places weren't, it's uncertain where we're going to be staying sometimes, but it was like he'd made that determination, and it wasn't negotiable. And but then when he finished, there was just this incredible delight, and he had spent his whole life looking back at that and say, he can only have delight about that. That he did that. One, it was difficult. Two, he did it for Ajahn Chah, in memory or in honor of Ajahn Chah, and that's something that he again, that's another benefit, having done it, looking back. It's sort of like the Master Hua's adage, bitter practice, sweet mind. There.
So, on kind of what happened? What would be your recommendation for when we do make a determination, and either we figure it's not working out, or we transgress it, we break it? How do we continue from there?
Well, sometimes it's just sort of realizing that this just isn't working. This isn't helpful. Like I remember one time making a determination to can't remember whether it was for 2 weeks or for a month or something. I made this determination. I'm going to eat one day, fast a day. Eat one day, fast a day. Eat one day, fast a day. And in a week, I was a wreck. Just my whole digestive system was just a wreck, and I just said, okay, I can't. This isn't good for me. Similar, I remember fasting. The first few times I tried fasting, I spent my time, after 2 days, I spent my time puking. It's really, really not helpful. So that we just have to recognize what our limitations are, and say, okay, well, that's a limitation. It's not useful, and and it's not through, and it's not as if it's it's not as if it's immoral. If it was it's just is okay. It's not working. It's a different kind of thing than making a determination to not steal or not to keep the precepts on celibacy. That's a whole different category. Making a determination to not take the life of any living creature. It's not working for me. No, that's not. It's not negotiable. So, those are because there's I mean, there's moral precepts and there's renunciant precepts, and those the renunciant precepts are how do we work with those? How do we, and sometimes we'll slip up on them, or just through either laziness or distraction, and then that's one of the benefits of confession. You can confess it. Okay. New restart, kind of restart the system.
When one, in certain situations, when one makes an aditana, would it be done like in a formal way? Like you would like, I think I remember reading about CTTV or something like that, and they would like announce it in front of the like all the sangha or something. But I was just wondering if there's any way that it's done like that.
Yeah, I've heard of that. There's many different ways. There's no template. Sometimes it's helpful to let the senior monk know what kind of practices one is doing, just so one, to get advice, and two, that they can sort of say the senior monks are aware of, okay, that's why he's getting scrawny, or that's why he's so grumpy. Okay. So then it's more. There's a value to making letting somebody know, whether it's a senior monk or a peer, as a way of trying to block the roots for one, the mind that wants to weasel out of something. That's a bit difficult. That's just really ordinary. So that's you can use that as a skillful means to do that. But it's not necessary or essential.
Maybe I could just echo the helpfulness of talking to the senior monks when I was junior monk, talking to Ajahn Pasanno or Ajahn Amro and make an aditana, because when I was at Anagarika, I had an aditana to make a new aditana every week. Completely untenable, completely unrealistic, and I would make these foolhardy aditanas in front of my shrine and never could keep almost a single one. And then once I started talking to the senior monks, it was like they could tell me, oh, that's unrealistic, or oh, okay, that sounds okay, but do it, adjust it this or that way, or pick this or that out for yourself. Super helpful.
So you mentioned that these are practices to be used for tools to get us out of a rut or a strongly entrenched habit. So I was wondering about, like, is there any guidelines on, like, I guess it's just a skill of developing, like, which ruts we're stuck in, kind of, and which tools to use.
Yeah.
And also, and second question maybe being, like, what are other tools besides dhutangas to use when we're really stuck in a strong habit?
Well, I mean, I think there's one is just being willing to experiment is really important. Where we're willing to experiment and then looking at the things that we take as crutches or as props for a sense of self, a sense of, like, I remember one pansa, I can't remember, it was fourth or fifth pansa, and I made an aditana to not do any aditanas. It was just because it was sort of like, been trying to do this, trying to do something special, so wait a minute, it's just learn how to watch the mind, and because sometimes you can turn it into a thing as well. So there's different just the way that defilements fool us, and how we get caught up in different kinds of reactions or positions or whatnot, and in being able to. I think one of the things that's important is just for really undermining, say, deep-seated ruts and conditioning is finding ways to keep re-establishing a faith and trust in the Triple Gem. It's just so important, and that kind of in different ways how to really abide with a refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, which is because it just keeps getting deeper and deeper. Because usually we try to get some kind of practice or some kind of result or and it's so much about me, and that giving oneself to the Triple Gem and really finding a solid refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha is really an opportunity for relinquishment and real ease.
Maybe switch gears just a little bit. This answer is just reminding me of the importance of brahmaviharas, and I know for myself a lot of my kilesas have to do with fear and anger and things, and so just thinking about how the brahmaviharas, what are the importance of brahmaviharas for Westerners maybe especially, but also balancing out dhutanga practices.
Yeah, I think that is actually really an important perspective, in the sense that it can be that kind of commitment to the dhutangas it makes for very, very grim states of mind, and it doesn't have to, but I mean that's sometimes what comes up, because sometimes what it triggers in us is a competitive mind, or a kind of I'm really going to beat up on my kilesas now, and I'm going to really conquer them. It's not a good mind state to start with. So the grounding and cultivation, grounding oneself in and cultivation of the brahmaviharas is really such an important piece of the whole path, really, because it does, I see, the fruits of the practice. Again, you think back on think of the qualities of the Buddha, which of course that's what we're trying to cultivate, and those wisdom, compassion, purity, and those are three kind of legs that the Buddhist practice stands on, and those are what create a stability. You've got enough of a foundation to be able to have a solid base, and and they need to be balanced and attended to, so that those aspects of compassion, loving kindness, the brahmaviharas, as these expansive, bright states of mind, states of being, are really, say, uplifting and soothing for the mind. If we're constantly trying to be pure, And of course, and see, the thing is, all of them are necessary. That sense of purity in that there is a commitment to relinquishment of greed, hatred, delusion, a commitment to selflessness, a commitment to a quality of effacement. Then, of course, the practice it's an essential part of the practice. But then, it's also human nature to get obsessed with purity, which is, I say, like those they say, sila bhatta paramasa is that seeking purity out of some kind of practice, some kind of precept, some kind of something that I do is going to make me pure, and so that's an obstacle. That's one of the main obstacles to stream entry. So it's sort of the inside of the Dhamma is blocked when we're focused on purity. But it doesn't mean we don't keep those precepts. We have that commitment to effacement. But it needs to be balanced with wisdom and compassion. And similarly, wisdom on its own, without the other two, can end up being very either over analytical, over rational, over clever. If you get it all figured out, and sometimes you meet people who are Buddhist practitioners who know the teachings and know they've got the book knowledge, they've got it all in place, and they're just insufferable to be around if they use it either as a club or as a prop for their own sense of self-worth, or to tear down others, and that happens. In all of the Buddhist history and in the Buddhist world, it's just the nature of mind. So that's where those aspects of wisdom, compassion, purity are the tradition. It's like when we do just the chant Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. That's pointing right to those qualities. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava. It's like Bhagava, the Blessed One, is the embodiment of loving kindness and compassion. Arahang is in Thai. It's interesting because when the word Arahang is one who's far from defilement, and that is and that's a commentarial, very, very old way of expressing purity, so that it isn't, again, the sense of, you don't have to kill all the kilesas, you just need to not get close to them. And Samma Sambuddho is self-awakened, and so that's that quality of wisdom. Those three qualities are the qualities that we need to rely on. So that loving kindness and compassion are really essential pieces of a balanced heart, balanced mind.
And over time, with like the different practitioners, like you mentioned Ajahn Jayasara, or many, there's other monks who have successfully put these dhutangas and the practices into for good effect. What are some of what are some common themes of the results that you've seen in practitioners who make good use of these practices?
Well, I think it's sort of, when somebody makes good use of those practices, they're probably making good use of all the different practices, and so it tends to. It's not specific to the Dhutangas. I think it's that those are kind of part of that interest in training and trying the different aspects of training and learning how the training works and how the Buddha's teachings really affect me. How can I implement them? What's the effect? So there's an interest, and that the fruits, of course, are in just the well-being and clarity, and these are people you want to draw close to, both because of their clarity, their wisdom, but also their pleasing beings to draw close to.